Talking about forgiveness today. I guess to tell you about my problem with forgiveness and the struggles I had with it, I have to start from the beginning. So, just to tell you a little part of my life, I was blessed from the beginning of my life. My dad died when I was just a baby, but God sent me a great dad to raise me in church. He taught me everything really I know. I idolized him. I wanted to be just like him when I grew up. And went through Christian school, had great friends, great church, great youth leaders, married my childhood sweetheart. So everything pretty much perfect in my life. Graduated college and had a son and got a good job right away. And along about, I guess I was about 25, God started dealing with me. I preached a little bit with my buddies and stuff. We'd go around to churches and witness, and God started talking to me about going into ministry. And about the only person I'd ever talked to about it was my mother. And I'd talk to her about it, and she'd say, well, you know, I had a career, and I kept saying, yeah, I don't know if I want to preach, but God was calling me to it. And long as I turned 26, I just turned 26 in September of that year, my whole life changed. And one night, I talked to my mom about 11 o'clock. We'd get home from a football game, and an hour and a half later, I got a call. I went to her house, and she was shot. My stepdad, in his sleep, had shot her, the man I'd idolized. And that night, it's like my whole life changed. Everything every goal I had, everything that I'd aspired to do just went out the window. At first, I turned to God like I should have, but it didn't take long. I was growing bitter. I didn't agree with the choices my stepdad made after her death. And even though I didn't even realize it at the time, I was holding that against him. In my mind, over time, I thought I'd forgiven him. But my ideal forgiveness was that I just didn't have anything to do with him. And if I didn't have to think about it and didn't see him very often, then I didn't think about it. But what I really didn't realize was I was burying the anger and the bitterness. And during that time, within about a year after that happened, I started dreaming about that night. And every time I'd wake up, I'd be as mad and angry as I was the night it happened. And this went on for a long time. I would talk to him, and like I said again, in my mind, I'd forgiven him, but I'd talk to him as little as I could. I had as little to do with him as I could. And this went on almost 20 years. And I was miserable. I didn't like anybody. I didn't want to have friends because friends just brought emotions up. I ran from God because when you're close to God, you have to have love in your life, and I didn't want to love anybody. I wanted as little emotion in my life as I could so I could deal with what I was going through. I went, like I said, I would go to church, and I'd run from God though. I'd run from people. I didn't want to deal with anybody. I didn't have any compassion for anybody. My wife would tell me, "You've got the coldest heart of anybody I know." And I'd pray to God sometimes to soften my heart, to take that away from me. But I couldn't. He wouldn't do it because I wouldn't give up that hate and anger that I had in my life. I was sitting here in Great Fork Baptist Church one day, 20 years later, and God started dealing with me. He'd been talking to me, and again, he was talking to me and calling me into that ministry that he had called me to 20 years before, over 21 years before. And I'd ran from it, and because I couldn't deal with the circumstances in my life that I'd went through. I wasn't really mad at God, but if I had a relationship with God, again, I had to have love, because God is love. And I was sitting here one Sunday morning at Great Fork, and God started dealing with me, and he showed me basically I relived my life that day, everything that he'd ever did for me. When he sent a dad after I had lost mine when I was a baby, never knew my own dad. But he loved me and he raised me just like I was his own. I never knew any difference between him and my brother, the way he treated me or my brother. And like I said, he taught me well, and I basically idolized him. But I'd lost him that day, the same I'd lost my mother in my own mind. And I couldn't really forgive him to be like it was. Although I didn't realize he was probably going through a worse time than I was during that time, trying to deal with what had happened and that he was responsible for it. But I didn't care about that. I just cared about myself, and I was selfish, and kind of shut everybody else out except my immediate family. But that morning here in the church, God started showing me everything he did for me. How he had gave me my wife, how he had provided me always jobs. I'd always had a healthy life. I went to, like I said, a Christian school that taught me all about God and what I needed to know, and yet I ran from that. And as he showed me here that morning, and I was dealing with it, with the dreams that I was having about my mom's death and that anger and issues, I finally just broke down and I said, God, I can't do it. I just can't do it. I can't deal with it anymore. And just as clear as anything I've ever heard in my life, he spoke to me, not out loud, but in my mind, and I knew it was him. He said, you've never asked me to take it away from you. And that day, I asked him, I said, God, it's on you. You're the only hope. I can't do it on my own. So I give it all to you. And that day, it's just like he broke the hardness off of my heart, just like it was a rock and it was gone. He opened my eyes up. He removed that dream that I dreamed over thousands of times over my life and just hated it. I couldn't sleep at night. He removed that from me, but the reason he removed it from me is he also removed that hate. He gave me love again for people that I never even wanted to have anything to do with. He gave me friends again, guys that I could rely on in this church and outside the church that I know that if I got a problem, I talk to them, and they can come talk to me. But he removed that day. And as long as I had that hate and that unforgiving spirit in me, God couldn't deal with me. He couldn't help me out of that situation. But as soon as I turned it all over to him, and he removed that from me, and that's the only way I could get rid of it, because I proved that on my own. I tried for 20 years to deal with it and just kept getting deeper and deeper in a hole. And everything I did would just turn wrong. But that day, I gave it all to God. And I said, God, you help me forgive it. You help me forgive him and forgive everybody. And for all the things I've been through, you take it away, and I'll trust in you, and I'll do what you have me to do. And he did that day. And, God says, it says in the Bible, and I think it's John, it says, how can you say you love God who you've not seen, but you hate your brother? He said, if you do, you're a liar. And I was basically a liar, because I said I love God in front. I'd go to church, and I couldn't love God because I couldn't even deal with God, because God is love. And if you have a relationship with him, you're going to love your brother and your sister, and no matter what they do to you. You can't have hate in your heart. And if you're dealing with that today, I promise you'll never be what God wants you to be. You'll never be able to answer to his call. You'll constantly struggle as long as you hold that hate in your heart. I'm perfect proof of it. But if you're willing to give it all to God and just ask him to take it away, just put it all at his feet, he'll gladly step in and take it away and give you the strength to forgive that person. And what you really don't realize is that person probably doesn't even know you're mad at. My dad, he heard after I stood up not long after that and gave my testimony here. And somebody had told him what I'd said, and he called me. He said, I thought you forgave me a long time ago. And really, I thought I had too, but I kept that bitterness in my heart. And I just had to turn it all over to God. And I encourage you today, if you're holding something against somebody, I don't care what it is. If I can forgive my dad for the death of my mother, God can remove that. He can remove anything. And I encourage you today, just put it all on him, and he'll take care of it all.